Morning, everybody. Welcome to special meeting of council for the Township of Minden Hills for Thursday, January 16th. In review of today's special council meeting, council will proceed with the 2025 budget deliberations. Included today is the tax-supported budget for building and bylaw, community services, and planning departments. We will also hear reports from Building and Bylaw regarding Pound Keeper Services and the Lachlan Community Center, as well as a report from Community Services regarding cemetery lawn care. Madam Clerk, please proceed with a roll call to confirm council attendance.
Counselor Sisson,
Present.
Counselor Saney,
Present.
Counselor McKelvey,
Present.
Counselor Johansson,
Present.
Counselor Ingram,
Present.
Deputy Marshall,
Present.
Mayor Carter.
Present. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Minden Hills is located on Treaty 20 Michisagi territory and in the traditional territory of the Michisagi and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which are Curve Lake, Rama, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. We acknowledge the shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. I call this meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. Madam Clerk, please proceed with reading the resolution.
Moved by Counselor Ingram, seconded by Counselor Johansson. Be it resolved that the January 16th, 2025 special council meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
All those in favor? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we move right on to our first item of business. Our Director of Finance, I'll let you carry the show.
Thank you, Mayor Carter.
I'm not sure your microphone is on.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just. Okay. Closer. Thank you, Mayor Carter. Good morning, council, and everyone attending online. Just some preliminary comments, from following up from Tuesday's meeting. Staff have appreciated the comments that have taken place so far, and we're working through those comments as we speak. And council has received the line by line data this morning and a minor amendment to page 10 of tab 6. So we appreciate those comments and hope it goes well again today. And this is a moving process, and we'll be taking everything and compiling everything and refining it further for the February 4th meeting. So that being said, we'll move into page 3 of tab 6, building and bylaw services. So as I did on Tuesday, we'll just go through and do some highlights of each department when we get to it. So under building and bylaw, we've separated the building and bylaw and the planning departments this year in 2025 as standalone departments. Building permits have increased up $5,000, and septic inspection and what revenue was a cost recovery revenue in the 2024 budget, what really wasn't realized. So that was removed of $15,000 because it was cost recovery. So it wasn't really a revenue. Compliance fees have been moved to become more reflective of the actuals, and it has been reduced $5,000. So I will open the floor to any questions council members may have on the overall building bylaw budget. And then the director will be providing, we'll go through the capital, and then he'll have a report following commentary.
Are there any questions at this point? Councillor McKelvey?
Last year when we dealt with the budget and the
fees and charges, we put the building permit administration fee up $50, and at the time, we were told that would generate an extra $20,000 for last year, and that was partway through the year, so the statement was made that we would get another 20,000 increase this year, so I just don't know. Like, did we not meet but like, we haven't got the actuals yet, so the building permits, did we not meet that?
Yes, so that'll be part of the further review once we look at the actuals and bringing that back February 4th. So we'll take that comment back and review that increase in that fee as well to see, because when the fees were increased in June, I believe, of 24, it hasn't been a full cycle yet, so we will do that analysis.
Okay. The other thing I just need to ask is, where is the short-term rental expenses and revenues? Is it in the building department or the planning?
So there's a combination between building and planning with the short-term rentals. So right now, there is costs built into the building department and the planning department to cover off those items.
Can we set it up as its own little?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I may just help out because our treasurer wasn't here. And I think to Councillor McKelvey's point, I've asked for February 4th that we have an idea of short-term rentals and the costs associated, whether it's from building, bylaw, planning. So we will make sure that that comes forward as a bit of a separate entity.
Councilor McKelvey?
So from what we're looking at today, though, have we factored in the revenue that we are projecting for short-term rentals plus the expense for Granicus? Like, it's 20,000 a year, I think, if I remember. I don't know for sure, but.
Yeah, so there has been some things built into the budget. So as the CAO alluded to, that will be refining that further for February 4th.
Okay, because last year we didn't budget the actual wages and benefits for the person, and so that'll all be part of that. then?
Yes.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, so then we'll move into the capital sheets, starting at page 5 in your package. So the first one is the curling club roof. This one is a grant that has already been applied for. So potentially, if we're successful on that grant, we would receive either 50% or 70%. We would not know that at this time. Funding. So that is one of the items that council will have to deliberate, that if we are not successful at receiving the grant this year, would you want to continue with doing that roof this year if we had to pay 100% of the cost? So that, I just highlight that it's in the budget, but it is factored in to come from reserves for our portion if we're successful in the grant.
So when would we know about the grant? Do you have any idea?
I would say we would know maybe end of February, beginning of March is my guess.
And then do we have a choice on deferring this? What's the status of the roof? I mean,
Yeah.
we saw what happens to delayed roofs in this building, so.
Mhm. So I guess we would have to prioritize that if, how would I'd come back with some recommendations that if we weren't successful, where we could potentially get the money from. And then council would have to decide if you want to proceed or potentially wait for another grant or do some other something like debt, or like all those different options of financing, right? So it's just to wrap our heads around you know, if we aren't successful. We're hoping that we are going to be successful because there was a lot of work put into that grant application.
But I assume this is looking at the dollars, this is a fairly substantial, this is the whole roof that's
Yes,
being done.
yes, it's the whole roof plus the insulation, which is a component of the roof as well. So,
Yeah, so Councillor Sisson first.
I was just wondering, last fall, the club themselves were trying to get a grant, but they couldn't apply for it because they didn't have an agreement. Do you know if that's still available for the club to apply to also for a grant?
I'm not 100% sure of what grant they were looking at, but I think that it would be more successful at the municipal level with some of the different grants. So this one is quite a substantial dollars that is available if we are successful. So I'm not sure of what percentage of the dollar, the grant that they were looking at.
Madam CEO.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, and Councillor Sisson is correct. The club was going after the Trillium grant last year. The agreement is in place, and I know discussions have been happening with the club. And we will take that away, Councillor Sisson, to confirm whether or not there's an additional grant that can be applied for.
So was the Trillium grant specifically for the roof, or was it more of a general?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they were looking at contributing to the interior and the insulation portion of the project.
Okay. Councillor McKelvey.
If we could see the building assessment engineer report that was done in 2024, I think that would help us to understand how bad it is. Also, I understand the curling club may be willing to help out with some of this because they were trying to do the insulation last year with a Trillium, but they weren't able to apply. And they are also wanting a copy of this engineer's report. So are we able to give it to them, or?
We will do so.
Should we be seeing it?
Sorry?
Should we be looking at it? The engineer's report?
I've got that as a follow-up item. Councillor McKelvey.
Okay, any other questions about the curling club? Let's
Okay.
move on.
So the next one is, oh, sorry.
Yes, Councillor McKelvey.
This is a substantial project. We're showing it as all coming from, if we're successful, coming from reserves. I would like to suggest, and you can put it in the maybes, that we consider putting an actual levy towards this year that'll help start building. If we have to borrow, then that debt payment's partially built in, put something towards this.
Okay, so the next item,
Do we, I'm sorry,
Oh,
do we
sorry.
discuss that? Do we,
I think a note was taken.
but I'm the only one saying it. So is everybody agreeing that? Let's not waste their time following up on something that nobody else agrees with.
Well, I can tell you that I'm waiting to get through the whole budget and then find out what our surplus is and then determine what it is that we need to borrow for and what projects we need to do. And that we said that we would come back on February 4th to find out what a status is. So I think it's a bit premature to add a specific project to that. I think we have to look at all of the projects together and find out what our borrowing needs to be, what has to come from reserves, what levies we need to put into place. Madam CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and yeah, that had been our intention to have that discussion around funding sources. But I think to Councillor McKelvey's question, if as part of the follow-up, staff can make a recommendation that if we're not successful with the grant, where it might be funded from. Thank you.
so This second capital request is to purchase and install 3 two-way radios in the vehicles within building and bylaw. And this is basically a health and safety issue because there is some dead zones to keep staff safe if there is a situation where they need to contact somebody because they don't have self-service.
Councilor Ingram?
The chair. I wonder if we shouldn't talk to community services as well about getting radios in their vehicles. I'm not sure they do.
Through the chair, we do have.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Never mind then. Thank you.
Okay, so then moving on, this is a grant that the township has received, an ICIP grant. We've done some investigation on this grant to move it forward. We have been in talks with the province to looking at what the original grant application had entailed and maybe modifying that and bringing that back to council as a total review of what we can still do with those dollars because they were 2019 dollars. So that is in the works from the staff perspective to reach out to the province and itemize those things where we feel the greatest need is in the different buildings. So this is, so they have confirmed that as long as we spend the money, they're agreeable to changing the terms of the agreement, the initial agreement. So our portion of that grant would be $303,331. So we'd like to move that ahead, and we wanted to bring that back as information to council that it would be coming back at a further date for amending the agreement.
This is various projects that have.
Yeah, mostly
determined what they are.
accessibility type infrastructure upgrades in different various buildings.
So we did have a list of, a plan of what we were going to do. So is that plan now changed? Or are
It'll
you
put-
reprioritized or?
Yeah, it'll be reprioritized because of the cost increases since COVID. And we would have to review exactly what we could still do within that funding model.
Councilor McKelvey?
So will that'll come back to council then
Yes.
to agree on, because we'll probably only be able to do half given the price increases that we've seen since then. The other thing is accessibility funding is eligible for grant applications on an annual basis.
Yes, it is.
And a lot of townships around here have been very successful in getting that every year. So can we maybe in the future get some kind of a report that tells us what staff's recommending that we apply for this year?
So right now, we're looking at the different annual grants that happen each year and putting some planning in place to capitalize on some of those applications. So that will be coming back.
I assume that most of these grants are not 100%. So in other words,
Right.
that if, we can get a grant, but we have to spend money also to.
So normally, like the ICIP grant, there is a federal portion, a provincial portion, and a portion from the township.
Right.
The Trillium Fund grants are usually 100% dollars that we could use. So those are the ones that we're gonna try to target and get 100% dollars.
Councilor McKelvey?
If we could go back to the page 3 and some of the summary, it was talking about the facility asset portfolio going to the building department.
Yep.
Which is non-issue for me, but a more fulsome review of facilities will be completed. And I know when we had the asset management plan presentation, it talked about only certain number of buildings that had an assessment completed. So have we worked in the budget to do more of those assessments?
So just on that point, part of the previous meeting that we had on the 14th of the asset retirement obligation, part of that engineering is going to be looking at each building with a fulsome report. So that will also be extra information for asset management and the building department to review facilities, to put a plan in place to ensure that we're moving ahead, looking at different components of the structures.
Councilor McKelvey?
So I would like to ask if we can talk about the old fire hall. We've talked about it through 2 budget processes, and we never seemed to make a decision on it. And as we've been told about the Lachlan Hall, the longer we leave it, the more the mold grows. Like somewhere along the line, council needs to be able to talk about this and put out our thoughts and ask staff to do investigations. I hate that it sits there in the downtown core and we have so much potential that we could do with it. I mean, we had a letter last year from a constituent that talked about previous committee recommendations in the previous term. We just never seem to make a decision on it, so.
Councilor Singh?
Yes, I'm really looking forward to getting the feedback from our community consultations, and I think those kinds of things, what we do with that building, definitely we need to move ahead with something there. But I think the community consultations will really give us indication which way we need to move, and then we start to look at our budget and downtown planning in a much broader scope with the people who are here every day or visiting and who have had input into that. So I suspect that staff will come back with reports about how these consultations work with our long-term planning and how that then interacts with our budget, because I don't think that's something that we can focus on right now at this budget meeting. I think it's something we need to absolutely consider, but I'd like to see that with our community input. So thank you.
Councilor Engel?
Through the chair, should we be talking a little bit about the dog pound idea? Or,
Okay,
I think.
no, it's before all of that. That's why I'm asking.
Oh,
We miss it.
We didn't specifically talk about it.
I
It's
think
right on the first page. Sorry.
it's gonna be a report.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is there a report coming?
Yeah.
That's fine then.
it's in the
That's fine.
package.
Okay, that's fine.
No, it's on there.
We'll deal with it then.
Yes.
Councilor McKelvey?
I appreciate Councillor Sini's idea that the community consultation is gonna maybe bring out information on people's thoughts on the old fire hall. My understanding was when this was dealt with several years ago or a few years ago or whenever it was prior to our term, that there was a committee did a lot of work on this and came up with some ideas of what should be done on that. And again, we're gonna sit here and put it off. I just wish we could at least think about something. I didn't bring it with me, but it's definitely in your previous. I think it might have been planning and development, might have been something else.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can note it on the list and staff can review previous reports and perhaps bring an update at a future council meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a separate project that we have to be looking at, and it really is in the context of, how we want this whole area to develop downtown. And, so, I don't think we're not necessarily going to make a budgetary item at this point to say speculating what we could do, but I think it's a project that has to be looked at, and it's a worthwhile thing to look at doing.
So if there's no other further questions or comments, I think we would move into the director discussing the pound keeper services. Yeah, I'm just looking for the page. So after your page 19, there's a staff report. I guess. Before the director discusses the report, this has not been built into the budget as it stands, so this would be an additional. After page 19. 6.
Tab 6.
Go ahead.
Morning, Mayor and Council. What you see before you is Report 2501, which is for a pound keeper agreement for our local municipality here. A little bit of a background on this is the Township of Minden Hills last year, we responded to 17 related bylaw complaints, dog-related bylaw complaints, pardon me, 58% of which were dogs running at large. We currently do not have a pound keeper agreement in place. Staff is not trained at this time to capture and relocate animals to a pound. And as you know, the closest location for the Society of Protection of Cruelty of Animals, they are located in Bracebridge, Bancroft, and Bob Cajun. So for us to be able to capture dogs and to travel that distance, it would be wouldn't be feasible for that to happen. So council inquired on October 31st, 2024, regular council, is whether we can look into the idea of having our own pound keeper locally here. So in that sense, we went out and requested some agreements and some pricing from 2 local pound keepers. As you can see in the analysis, one of them was looking for a mutual partnership with the township and to help build some of the infrastructure required for the purpose of keeping dogs. The second proposal was fully self set up. Everything is there. Everything is ready to go. They have all regulations are in place. They would be ready to hit the ground running tomorrow if council so deemed to go ahead and make this decision. As you can see through the financial implications, it would either be an on-cost, a basic cost of approximately $3,000 a year, plus any additional animals that come in and things that go on and what they have to do at additional costs to the township. The other agreement, the first proposal was a significant financial implication for the township in order to get that up off the ground and running. Happy to take any questions if you have any.
Deputy Mayor Shell.
Not necessarily a question, but Ms. McDonald came to council several years ago offering this service then. So it's nice to see that we're following through with something. And I see that Dysart has as well, correct? So
Through the mayor, it is actually Algonquin Highlands who has an agreement. Dysart has their own pound. Yeah, you're welcome.
So just run down costs a little bit more if you could. I know it's all here, but just if you
So through the mayor, which particular proposal would you like me to run down? All of them or?
well, yeah, sure.
Okay.
That would be best.
So proposal one, the financial implications were that they were looking to construct some buildings to help house the animals. The estimated construction cost for that would have been $29,606. And the daily care and sheltering per dog would be $25 plus applicable fees. Any veterinary care for each individual animal would be $850. And that's an estimated, depending on the severity and how the condition of the animal is. The second proposal, it would be a $300 per month fee, flat rate fee.
Right.
Okay, so that's $3,600 a year. And any dog that comes in above 5 dogs, so we would have the ability to bring 5 animals in, would be $100 per additional dog that comes in, chargeable to the township. And if the pound is required to transport the animals, it would be $50 per hour for transportation, depending whether they're going to the veterinarian or the local SPCA or something of that kind. Anything other than that, like a flea and tick dewormer, any treatment that's required, that's all billed at a cost basis. So whatever the cost is for that to happen, is what we would be bearing the cost for. And of course, the HST would be added to all of these costs here. Now, the dog owners themselves, so if we were able to capture an animal, bring it in, and they were able to find the owner would be responsible, depending on what council deems fit to set as the fee for recovery of their animal. So that's at the discretion of council. And they would be charged a pickup fee, $15 per day for food. So say, for example, the animal is there for 2 days, $30 worth of food that the animal would eat. And of course, taxes are applicable to that. Now, some of the cost is internal cost for us, for staff. So canine apprehension and catch bowl training, approximately is $310 per officer. Okay, we would need a minimum of 2 officers to be trained to be capable to offset vacation, sickness, and that kind of stuff if required. To outfit one of the vehicles with a barrier between the back seat and the front seat to protect the drivers and passengers, that's approximately $219.90 and that's easily installed we could install that ourselves. It's not a difficult thing to do. And a catch bowl is about $216.
So just, you catch a dog and you transport it, back over to here, and then nobody calls. Like, what happens? Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So a couple of years ago, we decided to get rid of the dog licensing because we didn't have a pound. So now I'm wondering then, if we're going to be having this, should we be reinstating the dog licensing so that all the dogs have a tag? I mean, and that's an extra cost up front for us, but if people are paying for the tags in the end, it should even out. But is that something then that staff should be considering reinstating after we've removed it, because we do now possibly have a pound? And would that make it simpler because the dog would have a tag?
Through the mayor, absolutely. It would make a lot of sense to reinstate that. And there's a lot of communities out there, townships out there that are actually doing lifetime licensing instead of yearly licensing, which makes things a little easier, whatever we decide. Right?
Okay, go ahead.
Just to add to that then, so if something happened that we have staff that are trained to pick the dog up and they do have a tag on, it may just be as simple as, something as simple as making a phone call rather than having to transport out to pause, but it's still beneficial to have them in case you can't get a hold of an owner or their tag's missing, et cetera, but okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, I would, well, my question is that if nobody claims the dog, with, like, what are we doing with the dogs?
That's a question that would have to be put to the pound themselves. We would relinquish authority at that point. Once we hand it over to the pound, they are responsible for the animal. I'm not sure exactly what their process would be if the animal remains unclaimed.
Councilor Reagan?
I see that in the agreement there, it says the legal stewardship of any animal surrendered to pause will be automatically transferred to pause after a 4-day waiting period. So does that mean they assume all expenses after 4 days as well?
That would be the assumption. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Sani?
Yes, thank you. So the tags, I think being reinstated is a great idea, but we also have to look at microchips because a lot of dogs have microchips. Do they have a microchip reader, for example, that they would be able to see if the dog is chipped, find the owner as well, or something for consideration as we roll this out? Thank you.
Councilor Sisson first.
So I see you're projecting $10,000 a year, a new charge is that's what it's gonna be at the end of the year, if we go ahead with this.
Councilor McKelvey?
Facebook can be a terrible thing, but it can also be a really good thing. And when it comes to lost dogs, it's amazing. So, I'm sorry, I can't support this. Doesn't mean it doesn't have to be done. I believe I think the community looks after lost dogs. And you know, of the 17 dogs, roughly 9 were running at large. What did you do with those?
Through the mayor, unfortunately, there's not much that we can do with the dogs running at large. We hope that the owners would come back and claim them, or they would make their way back home. But without an agreement or trained staff, trapping an animal like that would be not a forthwith type of process for us.
I guess it's also difficult, you know, this 4-day thing is that, you know, sometimes the dog gets loose and is scared and just goes. It may not end up in the same township that it originated in. And so, you know, trying to find the dog, even if you're, you know, interested in doing that, is sometimes something that takes some time. So so $10,000 is what you're asking to put into the budget because you feel that would generally take care of this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the term we're asking, I think Mr. Gay was asked to bring back a report on what it would take. So it's really council's decision whether you want to get into this new service or not.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying that if we did get into it, we're estimating $10,000 a year net cost to us.
That's correct. That includes a little, you know, staff time and fuel and kind of things of that nature. That's kind of a number that would probably cover enough for the amount of dog at large calls that we do get.
Councilor Sisson?
The problem I'm having with it, 9 dogs, that's over $1,000 a dog. That we're gonna be investing. I'm have to question if it's worth it.
Councilor Sani?
Yes, thank you. I think we do need this program. We're changing, we're growing. I'd like to see microchips in this, and I'd like the cost to go back to the owners as well. So the costs of capturing and all of that we are paying upfront would have to go back on the owner in some way. So I think that's very important. We're going to run into all sorts of snags with that. If they live here, there's always the property tax to make sure we can recover our monies for their neglect of their dog. there's got to be some reasonableness. I know there have been people on our staff before who have taken care of stray animals until we find them, but we can't continue to rest assured that they're all going to live at Counselor Ingram's house until we find the home. So I'm thinking that we need to progress with something like this, and I'm in support of it. I do think there's a lot of policy questions and how we balance this. But to keep it in the budget this time and then come up with the bylaws and the way that we implement this would be a little bit later down the road this year. So thank you for that.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Oh, just to clarify then with. You just want to receive this information? That's about, so, yeah. So just to clarify, how would council like to proceed with the motion? The motion that's on, that we have, is basically to award the service and, direct staff to bring back a bylaw. I also heard around the table the reinstatement, of the issuance of dog tags. Is that something that we want to pass today, or?
Three, sorry, Madam CEO.
I just wanted to remind council that we have the supplementary reports. We have put recommendations in those reports, but those recommendations can be deferred to February 4th. But it's up to council.
Councilor Ingram?
Through the chair, I'd like to put it on your maybe list.
Yeah, I would agree that, as Councilor Sisson said, $1,000 a dog is a big price to be paying. I guess the other thing is, yes, obviously whoever is, whose dog it is should pay some costs and so on. But, I'm just thinking of the 10-year-old whose dog runs away and then it's recovered through this process. And then you want to charge the kid $300 or $400 to get his dog back. It's not always just irresponsible owners that lose dogs. Dogs take off after deer and various and sundry other things. I certainly would like this deferred to give some more thought to it and have it brought back. But I'm not in the position to say that we should be proceeding with this today by any way or means. Councilor Saini?
To add to that, I just want to really thank Paza Claris to stepping forward. We are extremely fortunate to have them in our community and that they're willing to take this on. So that is a big obstacle in itself in going in this direction. And I think there has to be, if we do have a bylaw, some way of saying, the kid's dogs took after the rabbits and he was only 8 years old and he couldn't hold on. I mean, there's going to be some give and take to this in some way. But I do think we need, as we grow and as things change, we do need to have some type of a way of assisting this, and also concerned too with the number of people who leave their animals at our waste facilities. Hopefully that is changing, but that has been an issue in the past too at the end of summers. So thank
Okay,
you.
so let's defer this. For today, we receive it as information and it can be brought back. Definitely on the maybe list. Councilor McKelvey?
I just want to point out that, it was a member of council that put forth this suggestion and Eric has brought this back to us as information, and I just don't want it to look like it was staff initiated. So, so we're going to defer this to when are we going to make decisions on these things?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor McKelvey's question, it'll be February 4th meeting.
Okay, let's read the resolution.
So I just made the amendment, Councilor Ingram and Councilor Johansson, just to, council directs to defer the consideration of the service to the next budget meeting. Okay. Moved by Councilor Ingram, seconded by Councilor Johansson, that council that council receives report 25001, building bylaw agreement award for Pound Keeper Services as information. And further, that council directs to defer the consideration of the service to the next budget meeting.
All those in favor? That is carried. What's next on?
So
You-
report 25002 with Lachlan, so the CAO and the director will be dealing with that report.
Okay,
Yes.
just before we get to that, just on the systems for the automation, you know, of permitting and things like that. So just maybe give us an update of, you know, how things are going and is there any potential impact on the 2025 budget from your perspective?
We are currently live with our permitting process, cloud permit. So all those, and it's all on our website. So those who are applying for permits are being redirected to that process. So we were trying to take everything through cloud permit and stopping that. We actually issued our very first permit on the cloud permit system. And so we are quite pleased with how the manner in which it's going. Staff is still learning the process. But the financial implication with regards to that aspect of it is covered in the 2025 budget. And we're hopeful that by sometime shortly, we should have an online payment portal in place. So those who are sitting in their living room applying for permits, and they can do whatever the payments and can all be made remotely without having them to physically come into the building to pay for things.
Okay, so to have those additional features and is there going to be costs associated with that or is that all part of what you're rolling out?
We don't anticipate any additional costs to it. So what's being rolled out is what's been
So
implemented.
you're happy with what think you're going to do and what's in the budget?
Yes, we are.
So I'll turn it over to the CAO for the next report.
Thank you very much. And through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Gay and I will tag team on this one. I'm was voluntold to present the report. Thank you, staff. I attended the Lachlan Community Center meetings this year. One, I was new and this seemed to be a big project. So it was for my own understanding. I found out we needed to draw staff in from other areas, given that the discussion was focusing mainly on the building and the property and the level of investment that we were starting to talk about. But first and foremost, council, this was a lot of work by the Lachlan Advisory Committee. And to start off, I'd like to thank Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Sisson, and the Lachlan Advisory Committee members for numerous meetings over 2024, a lot of good discussion. There's great history on that committee. I learned a lot on that committee. But I also, throughout the process, recognized we set them up with quite a challenging task. Usually an advisory committee is tasked with how do you want to program the space, not what do you want to do to restore this building and its viability. So before you today is a summary of a lot of the discussions that happened over the year. We looked at all kinds of options, building a new community center, renovating the existing community center where it sits, even moving it onto a new pad. Major issues that we were trying to deal with were water infiltration into the building. So we had to draw people in to look at drainage. What I can tell you is thorough review. Costs are not, they're challenging. They were challenging for the advisory committee to discuss, and they're challenging before council, any one of the options that the committee outlined. I do want to point out, and this is the reason that I'm making part of the presentation, is after the December 10th meeting, there were additional discussions about maybe there's another option. Maybe there's an opportunity to seek partner or partners to do something bigger on the site. If we did that though, council, if staff was so directed, my strong recommendation would be anything that we do has to include a community gathering space. The one thing that we confirmed throughout this process is the Lachlan Community Center has been a hub in the Lachlan Community Center or in the Lachlan community prior to COVID. So there is a need there. There is a desire for something there. But I commend the group for sticking with this difficult task. And I just wanted to point out in the report, beyond the technical options that are before you that the group reviewed, there is one other option that council could consider, and that's looking at redeveloping that property with the assistance of a partner or partners. And should council want to consider that, I could help with direction to staff. Thank you.
Questions? Councillor Sami?
Absolutely need to keep our community center there. So I don't think there's any debate or concern with anybody about that. Really like to see this put out as suggested on what are our possibilities of partnerships on this. I'd like to see something done that maybe we can even begin to have that kind of additional services here. We need to think about our planning and development, if you will, a little bit differently than how urban sprawl happens. But if we have little pods of communities and access points to build community in different places, those options are being looked at in terms of the new water and wastewater systems that are being investigated and will likely be approved soon by the province. So we have a different way of developing that we haven't thought about. So if we looked at this and said, okay, and then what are the possibilities of having some of this building and this new construction actually pay for itself as well through, I know we do rental spaces sometimes for our buildings, but what if we put a couple housing units there? I mean, I'm throwing this out as ideas, but I think other organizations and some other input, maybe looking at the community input that's coming in and some of their ideas, putting that together and then putting that out there and saying, okay, and having this information come to the committee and looking at what works in that area on some of our options and a better ball diamond and things like that as well. So I like the idea of doing something more there because we have this property that was given to us. We have an opportunity to actually make it start to bring in some money as well. So I'd like to see what those options are. Thank you.
So one of the things that we, with City of Court Lakes and Haliburton County Child Services, we have a huge problem in that not having enough spaces for childcare. Part of the problem is a lot of these groups that provide social services are provided funding for the purpose of providing those services, but cannot use any of their funds for bricks and mortar. Okay. And so, if there was some space, they can pay full market rent for a building that is already there, but they cannot go out and build something. Now, I'm just using that as an example of a partnership. But, there's the location of that, building and whether or not it would be suitable for child services or for other types of social services. But it will take time. You know, I mean, we are desperate on the childcare services to find spaces and, you know, we're working very hard to do that. Because I'm co-chair of this JAC committee, which takes care of child services. But you know, nothing could be done in a very short period of time to develop this partnership. And, you know, if you, particularly with childcare, there's a lot of very specific requirements that the government sets out as to size and, you know, how things are separated and fencing and yada, yada, yada. So, and I agree with the idea of a partnership that's wonderful, but understand that that would not be a short-term, you know, project. You know, it would take some time to do it, but you know, if we could, that would be great. Councilor.
Just throwing it out there, we got a nut and bolt put together building right here. I wonder what it would cost to transfer that over to Lockland Hall. The fire hall. It's all nuts and bolts. Might not cost as much as we think, $1 million or whatever, but it wouldn't hurt to see what it would cost to dismantle and put it back up, just so we know anyway.
Sure.
Because it could happen down the road that we sell it, whatever. Just a thought.
Councilor Deputy Mayor Shell first.
I would agree. Those are all great ideas as far as the community partnerships. It's just, my only concern is like what the mayor just said is this has been going around for so many years, and the Lockland Community Center in all of my time here has put so much effort and so many hours of volunteerism into this and saved money, made money. And I just don't want to see it kicked out too much farther. I think this council needs to make a decision and make something happen one way or the other.
Sure. Councilor McKelvey.
Just on that note, I think it's time to make a decision. It's time to put some money in the budget for at least a commitment to do something. We have a building that is growing mold. Previous council talked about it. We've talked about it. Like, this is just, enough is enough. Like, just put our money where our mouth is, or say we're not going to do it.
MCA.
I love the partnership idea, by the way.
So, and to, through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, great thoughts, and we'll note the follow-up items, and I appreciate, although been here a short period of time, I do understand from the committee that, to Councillor McKelvey's comment, they're just looking for a direction. They want to know where we're going. And so perhaps, I guess, if it was a partnership, the thought would be to let an expression of interest, release an expression of interest. And to your point, Mr. Mayor, maybe part of that is assessing how quickly somebody could make something happen. You know, I would see it as a two-stage process. We don't really know exactly what we want other than community gathering space. So I would suggest not to limit the possibilities. Receive those expressions of interest. Council, you would vet them and determine if there was somebody that we wanted to pursue a partnership with. But one of the evaluating criteria may be how quickly can you make something happen?
Councilor Sane.
So as council's venting all these possibilities, making sure that the committee is also engaged, particularly with that part of the community center and what that's going to look like and shape like over the long term. So I think this is a great way for the committee and council to work together and to actually get something there that's going to be there for a very long time serving the community. So history is continued. Thank you.
Councilor McKelvey.
So we had some numbers handed out to us this morning that it gives a little more detail, budget to budget, and if you go to what, my community services one is clipped together. I don't know if that helps anybody else, but anyways, when you get to Lachlan Hall and Irondale Hall, actually too, we're reducing the levy and again, our treasurer's new, she doesn't know the history. I'm not criticizing any staff member. But at the previous meetings, you will all remember that I've always had a problem with us keeping it at $10,000. Everybody else's department's budget has always been able to go up. But we have continued to keep Lachlan Hall and Irondale Hall at this $10,000 net levy. And this year we're lowering Lachlan to 6,500. So I realize we're in a financial difficult position, and I'm not here to just keep adding money to the levy. I think there's, excuse me, potential savings down the road here if we can start to decide on them, but I will not be in favor of reducing their levy. And I want us to make a commitment. I want a financial commitment put on the table today that says we're prepared to start whatever amount it is to show that we are supportive of doing something at the Lachlan Hall. I don't want to waste staff time. I don't want to waste valuable volunteer time anymore. And I don't want a building to continue to grow mold.
Deputy Mayor Shell.
Just a bit of history on the $10,000. I believe that was probably 2007 or 8 when the current, the counselor of the day, Rick Ratcliffe, was brought that forward, and we put $10,000 in then a year. So that's been a lot of years of only putting in $10,000, and I think $10,000 went a lot farther in 2007 than it does now. So it's just, I would agree with what Councillor McKelvey is saying.
Councillor McKelvey.
I won't promise, but I'll try to leave it alone after this, but we have taken fundraising money from reserves towards operating of this, and that was never supposed to be happening. And last year, and the year before, we did these lovely reports that are in our binder that from Tulloch and Pinchin, and we used really, I don't even know what the word is, but we should never be taking money from fundraised money that's in a reserve to pay for a report that was caused by negligence of the municipality for mold. Like, that's just so wrong on every level.
Go ahead.
So to that point, for Councillor McKelvey, once we get to that, that has been removed. There will be no monies taken from the reserves to offset the operating. So that is out of the 2025 budget.
Councillor Saini.
Yeah, I'm just curious, did any of that money come from our COVID recovery funds? As we had to close it off for mold, I can't remember. So if that was, if it qualifies in any way, just a consideration for staff looking through the, where to find more money. Thank you.
So the COVID funds would have been closed already and reported on, so I would have to research that.
Go ahead, Councillor Saini.
So just how we move forward on this right now, as we have a kind of an agenda here. Is council in agreement then that we want to see if we can partner and see what we can make of this? Is the committee willing to go in that direction as well? Do we?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as I noted in the report, we haven't vetted with the community. I do understand that a couple of the committee members have discussed potential partnership, and there seems to be some interest.
I would also say that next week at the Roma conference, I can speak to the the CAO from the city of Kawartha Lakes and the Human Services to see if there's interest on the, at least on the side of the childcare
Hmm.
spaces. I mean, I think we're short, I can't remember, a few hundred spaces. You know, the location is, I don't know how many children are in that area, how many people would want to go to that area to drop off children, but you know, that's one of the possibilities of partnership.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I think once council has made a decision and given staff direction about seeking a partnership, then any discussions are sort of fair game. If council wants to consider giving staff direction, I am happy to be helpful with a resolution.
Councillor Saini?
Yeah, total support of trying to assist with daycare facilities. And I know this question's been raised before, but I think what we need to do is put this out as, and then all the different groups that you know of, that different council members know of that are looking for space, they can put in those proposals to the committee and to council. So we're not directing any particular need, but letting organizations know that might want to have a partnership to come in with us and what's your proposal? What's it look like? Take it to the committee. Does the committee's going to know if this really works, if they need the daycare or not, or housing, whatever it is there. So if we could just put a broad, call out for some partnerships and then let the committees process which really works best for that area, I think is a good start. And to do that proposal, before the snow melts would be nice, but thank you.
Councillor McKelvey?
So as our CAO has mentioned, it's not typical for a committee to be tasked with reviewing a physical asset like a facility. Committee members and staff have reached a point where council direction is required. I like the partnership. I love the partnership idea. I don't know where we've all of a sudden focused on daycare. Although I agree, we are so short in daycare, but there may be other wonderful ideas out there that if our staff put out this expression of interest, we would have a light bulb come on and go, what a great idea. We won't know until we direct staff to do that. And then, so I'm prepared to put forward a motion that says something about what we're going to allow them to do. But I also want a budget number put in here that we as a township are committed to doing something.
Let me just get to explain on why I brought up daycare. It's because I'm a co-chair of the committee, and also it's one of our responsibilities at the county. Yes, absolutely, but we're already paying for it. So it's that as opposed to other third party and other interested groups or service clubs or whoever it may be. This is just one of the areas within our responsibility. So, but it could be anything. I just use that as an example.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to read a proposed motion. I think our clerk is amending it to include Councillor McKelvey's suggestion of setting a budget amount, but let me just give you the expression of interest one first. The council directs staff to release an expression of interest seeking a partner or partners for the redevelopment of the Lachlan Community Center property, and that said expression of interest includes the requirement for community gathering space.
Yeah. So, right. So I just need to know the budget amount that council wishes to propose for. Just as a start point.
Just the 50,000, 50,000 sound right?
All right.
I was just gonna make a further comment that with the number that council proposes and potentially passes here today, that we'll look at that as well going forward with the surplus deficit numbers as well to see if, like we've discussed before, look at all avenues that may need some attention.
Okay, go ahead. Read the whole.
Okay, so just is Counselor Sisson and Counselor Saney comfortable with those amendments? Okay. So, moved by Counselor Sisson, seconded by Counselor Saney, that council receive report 25002, Building and Bylaw Service, Lockland Community Center update as information. And that council direct staff to release an expression of interest seeking a partner or partners for the redevelopment of the Lockland Community Center property. And that said expression of interest includes the requirement for a community gathering space. And further, that council directs staff to include $50,000 into the budget for this project.
All those in favor? That is carried. It is 10:10. We will take a break till 10:25. Welcome back, everybody. We'll let the Director of Finance continue. What's next?
Okay, so we're gonna move into Community Services Department. So I'll probably do these in stages because there's different components within community services. So I'll start the overview of the first one, which is community services overall.
Age.
Oh, sorry, 8. So just a quick summary that the arena revenue was increased by 5,000. And arena expenses and other services was decreased 10,000. And in the this section of the budget, we are doing full annualization of wages and benefits, and that's been factored in. In Parks and Recreation, the revenue has increased by 500. And in the expenses of building repair and maintenance, a decrease of 5,000. Other expenses decrease of 6,000, fuel decrease of 7,000, vehicle repair, a decrease of 5,000, signage decrease of 1,250, and equipment purchase decrease of 2,500. So all of those at this snapshot in time were looked at the actuals that were needed. So this will again will be reviewed in the next update of the year to date. So I'll open the floor for any comments or concerns.
Questions?
So we're just gonna ask questions that we have in the first half of page 8. Is that what I'm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll move into the halls and property, et cetera.
Okay, let's move on.
No question? Okay, so we'll move into the halls and property. So library building repair and maintenance decrease of 4,000. Heating in the library decrease of 2,000. Laughlin not using the reserves to fund operating, so that was a decrease of 6,105. Building and repair and maintenance decrease of 8,000. Heating decrease of 700. Irondale Hall, not using the reserves again to fund the operating, so that was a decrease of 1,515. Increase of revenues to actuals 500. In expenses, repair and maintenance decrease of 2,500. Heating decrease of 550. Equipment purchase decrease of 2,500. In property overall, in the expenses, repair and maintenance decrease of 30,500. Utilities and heating decrease of 8,000. And in the public washrooms, repair and maintenance decrease of 2,000. So is there any comments or concerns in that area?
Michelle,
Okay.
go ahead.
So some of these numbers we just got this morning, but
Right.
when you look at page 8, I was trying to figure out under overall expense projections, decreased by 62,250. So these are in like just the library, the halls and the property.
Yes.
So again, I go back to this, the halls, we're supposed to have at least a $10,000. So we've lowered the Laughlin to 6,505. The Irondale to 8,165. So we've actually lowered the usual $10,000, which I previously said should be higher, but
Okay, so being new as well, I wasn't aware of the minimum $10,000 requirement
yeah.
from past budgets.
When you
so-
look at the just the sheet, community service department halls that you gave out today, you'll notice Lachlan Hall deficit of 10,000. That's what that's always been, is this famous $10,000 is all you're gonna get.
Okay.
And then the same thing, Irondale Hall deficit $10,000.
So I guess just for my information, is that something that was just historically done, or was that in some sort of agreement or something of that nature? Because I try to make sure that whatever is needed, where it's needed, is adjusted, so I just need to know that going forward.
Through the mayor, yeah, that's correct. It was just a fee that was implemented during budget discussions, and it just always carried forward from year to year and council to council.
Because I guess to Counselor McKelvey's comments previously, $10,000 was in 2007 or whatever year it was, or sorry, Deputy Mayor. So, inflationary and things of that nature, I think that all kind of has to be looked at as well, right? It shouldn't be a stagnant number. So we'll work through those for the February 4th.
Councillor McKelvey?
So just to give you that update, that the net was supposed to be at 10,000, so whatever wasn't required in operating costs went to the reserves.
Okay,
So that's where you could bring that up, like we would, like you're showing contribution to reserve in Irondale 460.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what that was for.
yeah, so last year there was 400, so I've just added. a
Oh, okay,
percentage,
no,
right?
it was to offset to get to that 10,000 net. So
Okay.
whatever that was supposed to be, so.
Okay, yeah, because basically when I looked at this department for the Laughlin and Irondale, I wasn't in agreement with using reserves to offset operating, so that's why those came out. But I didn't know the other historical information.
Okay, anything else? Let's move on to cultural services. Go ahead.
Up with some of this information, so Irondale Hall, the income, I think minimal revenue in 25. We should be seeing some revenue there. It's being well used, so just so you know.
Yeah,
you
so
can look into it more.
in the previous budget, there was $0 put in for Irondale for revenue, so we put in 500 just to get close to the actuals.
And this may be a duplicate question, but you talk about on page 9, this, the most significant expense is building repair and maintenance, blah, blah, blah. So again, what about all these buildings that need to be assessed? So are you saying that was in admin's budget? Is that?
Yeah, so under the asset retirement obligation, there will be engineering reports coming forward in 25 on every property in the township.
Oh, okay, so that was, I think, 31,000 or something. Like, is that even gonna touch it?
No, it was around
That's
17,000.
even worse.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like
So,
how, like, the building assessment for the Lachlan Hall was more than that, I think. Close to it. Anyways, I'm
Yeah.
just throwing it out there. I'm not sure it's. So. I'll wait. I think you still have to tell us more on page 9 then, Greg.
yeah, so moving on to cultural services. Repair and maintenance decrease of 1,750. Advertising decrease of 5,000. Utilities decrease of 2,000. In art gallery, repair and maintenance decrease of 2,500. Programming decrease of 3,500. Heat in the museum, heating decrease of 2,000. Nature's Place, repair and maintenance, decrease of 1,000. Nature's Place, utilities, decrease of 1,000. And Nature's Place programming, decrease of 1,000. So is there any comments or concerns?
McKelvey?
I'm really surprised that our heating costs are going down. I'm wondering if we still have a lot of bills yet to come for 24. Like you're basing this on what the actuals are right now?
So this was based on a moment in time, so this will all be part of the review coming forward February 4th with the surplus deficits. And any minor adjustments would have to be done at that time.
Okay, so surplus deficit really, well, let's face it, it's not gonna be a deficit, it's gonna be a surplus. So but that's really for capital. So I'm just concerned we've got operating costs that aren't quite right here. That's all I'm wondering.
Yeah, so we've tried to look at them at a monthly basis to see what the norm is. So I believe in some of the notes I read from 2024 that utilities and things like fuel, et cetera, were increased. But then there was supposed to be a review of actuals. So that's what we've done to date.
Okay, again, without the actuals, it's
Yep.
hard to. Um,
Okay.
Okay, so
Cemeteries.
So moving on to the cemetery, so this is status quo from last year. So in this budget, there is still included $25,000 to deal with the lot grass cutting contract. So that will be a discussion with the director on her report coming forward shortly. So this can be used to offset the proposal of bringing grass cutting in-house. So I think now we'll ask the director if there's no other concerns or comments. We'll ask the director to come forward about the grass cutting. Yep. Nope. You want. So the staff report is following the last Lachlan report at the back of the tab 6. And it's report 2504.
Yeah,
Do you want it?
I got it.
It's right here.
If you put your tab, Deputy Mayor puts tabs in at random places.
I'll find it out. I read it. I read it. Oh, good.
All right, Ms. McGuigan, let's,
So bringing the report for the cemetery lawn care. So it was in June 27, 2024, the regular councilor had a resolution for us to look at in-house cemetery options. So we took this back at looking at bringing the cemetery lawn care operations back into house, as well as reviewing other properties. So for waste and water. So the scope of the work that we reviewed to bring it back in-house would include the cemeteries, the Leatherworth Heart, Leatherworth Yard, Minden Water Treatment Plant, and Minden Wastewater Treatment. So then there would be the internal transfer of the 3,300 coming back that currently is used for Aqua to do the contracting at the Leatherworth Yard and wastewater treatment and plant property. In reviewing this, we determined that we have equipment in-house to support this. And then looking at the staffing levels and scheduling indications, we are requesting for additional 2 summer park students to help support this in-house lawn care, which bringing these 2 students on board is approximately $15,250 per the students, which would be offset from the internal transfer, as well as what we currently have in the budget of the contracted services of the 25,000 to be applied to kind of be moved into wages to cover the students as well.
So annually, the biggest challenge is at the, in that Easter, Mother's Day period when students aren't available. And unfortunately, depending on what the weather is like, that's when the grasses are growing the fastest and so on and so forth. So how would you handle that?
So through the chair, in our application for the summer students, we have left that open. Previous years, we've dictated like a May start for students. So we have that open start date and end date. So we could have those students on the weekends to help project. Working with the supervisor of Parks, Recreation, and Cemeteries, we have devised a pretty extensive plan to if we don't have those students, of where our focus needs to be for Mother's Day and Father's Day. But our hopes is with the students that we would be able to use them on the weekends to help.
Madam CEO?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and I think we all had many calls last Mother's Day, so I asked this a similar question. And I think the other thing is, if we know that our staff's responsible, we can get on it right away rather than being caught off guard. So that, to Ms. McGuigan's comment, that will be a focus.
Yeah, sorry, and I just note that Easter is like April 20th towards the end of the month, and that's also becomes a day that people seem to get to the cemeteries if they're available. So we just have to be conscious of that date also.
So just through the chair. So technically the cemetery is open May 1st. So our cemetery cleanup is scheduled to start April 18th. If we have the appropriate weather, we're going to go as soon as we can in April to get in there, but it will be weather determined.
Okay. Mr. Sisson?
I know you do get some grants for students. Would this possibility be getting a grant for these or not?
Yes, so through the chair, we have applied for a grant to include these 2 additional summer students on top.
Mr. McKelvey?
So last year when we talked about this, we agreed to go with the contractor, and I'm trying to remember or see on here where the contractor's expense even is. If you look at these extra sheets we got, and maybe it's just something, again, without details from last year, it's hard, but anyways. We discussed this issue at length, and there was a strong feeling of some of us that we needed to go back to the way we used to do it, where we had a full-time person. They worked in the cemetery in the summertime, and they worked in roads in the wintertime. They did not only grass cutting, they were able to actually do burials, but I'm not suggesting that, but I would like to see somebody that's able to start giving the attention to the cemeteries that they deserve. We have sunken graves, we have monuments tipping over. There's a lot of other things that can be done in these cemeteries if you had a full-time person. instead of just a contractor cutting grass. And don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing the contractor we ended up having because our cemeteries looked amazing as far as grass cutting and that sort of thing. But I think we would get a lot more use out of a full-time and not students. I mean, I can't go with 2 students. I could go with a full-time and a student. But, in your report, it talks about lawn care April to November, 16 weeks. Well, that's 32 weeks. So are we cutting it just every other week? Is that where you got the 16?
Yeah, so through the chair, our contractor, the contract agreement was a bi-weekly cut. Bringing it in-house, we would be monitoring on a weekly basis.
Madam CAO?
Yeah, and I think, while we appreciate the historical, this grass cutting isn't just assigned to the 2 students. It is, the 2 students are supporting and augmenting the CSD team. And there will be full-time folks, there will be lead hand attending to the cemetery. So the model that we have right now is that we rotate people through and they learn all aspects of what's required in CSD. And so the 2 students are intended to augment for this seasonal aspect. And what we're proposing is this is the model we believe will work, and we'd like to try it for 2025. If we need to revisit, we're willing to do that in the fall. Thank you.
Questions? Councilman Kelvin?
So what are we going to do then for the graves that are sinking and need more material and grass seed and the monuments? Like, if we haven't been doing it, so are we planning that this 2 students helping is going to allow somebody to do that?
Yeah, so through the chair, so last year, there was, movement in this with our lead hand that takes the focus of the cemetery. This would give having the students or kind of dispatching to them, and the lead hand then has a full-time operator to do it. We've already started as of last year of going through the monuments that do need care and the areas of needing for soil and that. So we have a pretty extensive list of what we're looking to work through operational and for our team to be successful.
Councilor McKelvin?
When we're on cemetery, have you put anything in here for the fencing requirements at some of our cemeteries?
Yeah, so through the chair, we have some information that we've collected on it. Some of the fencing can be done in-house. We have a plan for that in place. 12 Mile is on our radar for the spring, as well as reviewing the other cemeteries and what complete, and you'll see a report back to council on those tasks.
Councilor McKelvin?
Is the money in the budget to fix the fencing at the cemeteries? That's what I need to know.
Yeah, through the operational for property maintenance.
So in the detail line by line that we got today, it shows wages the same amount this year as last year. And is other services, the 25.5, is that where the contract is?
Correct.
Which would be a lot more if we went for the whole.
So I just comment on that. So basically, we're paying out of water and wastewater for grass cutting now. So there would be, like, if this is approved by council as a go forward, those internal transfers would happen and those adjustments would be made for the February 4th meeting. Because that's already being captured in water and wastewater. So those funds would be an internal transfer to see it to the cemetery versus paying off well.
So, just seeking clarification, from council on whether or not you want to proceed with the resolution or if you wish to defer.
What is
For
the
grass
resolution?
cutting. It's for the grass cutting. For the in-house, 2 additional summer students, to support the in-house long-term maintenance program.
Read the resolution. We can determine from that.
Moved by Councillor McKelvey, seconded by Deputy Mayor Shell, that council receive report 2504, Community Services Department, Community or Cemetery Lawn Care for information. And further, that council approves the hiring of 2 additional summer park students to support the new in-house lawn care maintenance program.
All those in favor? That is carried. Page next.
So we'll move to, I'll just find the page number here. Page 14, we'll move into the capital items of CSD overall.
Is that still in tab 6?
Yes.
Councillor McKelvey?
Just before we go to capital, can I just ask one question? We were supposed to get a report back in the fall. That was a resolution in March that we were gonna deal with the Quonset hut and the insulation and or lack thereof. We didn't get the report, but what's the plan? What's in this operating budget to continue heating that big tin can or?
Through the chair, we actually are not heating the Quonset hut this year. We're making sure all our equipment is status quo, so we have not turned on the heat in the Quonset hut at SG Nesbitt Memorial Arena.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving to the first one on page 14, replacement vehicle in the Parks Department. So, if council remembers, we just surplused, the vehicle at the last council meeting. And, because it was inoperable. So this would be a replacement of this vehicle, to ensure that proper coverage of work is done. Is there any comments on that one?
Councillor Sisson?
Is this coming from a reserve?
Yes.
Councillor McKelvey?
Can you just explain which reserve?
It would be the Parks Reserve.
Okay, so, and are we gonna talk about reserves again later? That was mentioned at the last meeting. When we go back to that tab?
Yeah.
The reserves will come forward on the February 4th, once everything is,
Oh, okay.
because there's been changes.
Okay.
So the next one is the arena backup generator. And again, at the last council meeting, we surplus the old generator. So this amount of money, in this capital, the 15,800 is to do the engineering works of the backup generator for the whole of the building. So that's why this portion is in CSD. I guess we kind of skipped over maybe the capital one on the actual arena generator, which was actually in building bylaw.
Through,
I
through
apologize.
you, I thought the backup generator was in fire.
Oh, sorry. Yes, correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this is just to do the engineering to make sure that we have the right size generator for the whole of the building. But also in that component will be the backup generator for the Emergency Operations Center. So that's why it's in the different departments. So that's why it's a much smaller number here. So this is a grant that we've applied for through Emergency Services to cover that.
So when you say the whole of the building, would,
So it would operate like the ice pad, the
so I
The-
guess my question is that, is the ice pad part of emergency management? Like,
no, so that's why this 15,800 is it all depends on what the emergency is and the amount of work, like, do we just need a room to do the emergency management, or will you need a place where people, residents need to be accommodated?
Mr. Mayor?
Oh, sorry.
I guess I'm still a little bit confused. I mean, I'm not really certain in a state of emergency, we need a hockey game. I'm just confused as to, from emergency management, I see that as being a building where we could have an evacuation, or we need to, it's
That's
a cooling
exactly-
center, it's a warming center, it's whatever. So I'm just a little bit confused as to how the funding might go there.
Yeah, and I would agree, Mr. Mayor. I think the intention would not be to run the ice plant, but we may need heat in that area. We may need lights.
Sure.
So I think that's what our treasurer meant. I would agree with you that in a state of emergency, we're probably not firing up the ice plant to have ice, but we may need heat and lighting.
I see you, Ms. McGuigan.
And just to further that, it's not for the emergency, but the times that we have brownouts in that, so you know how we were talking about that your generator should be turned on in that, it would be for those little blips that if we had the power go out for a day, it would keep the plant, if the plant was in, that aspect.
Okay. I think, just, sorry, one further thing. So this is the sizing, but what about the engineering of the cabling and so on and so forth? Is that all part of this?
Yes.
Councilor McKelvey?
We discussed this at length last year. And we agreed, because we discussed a lot about the ice plant, whether you needed a generator big enough to do that. And we agreed, for the very reason that Candace has just said, it doesn't necessarily have to be for an emergency. We need to ensure that in the middle of an important hockey game and the power goes out, we have a generator to keep going. You could lose your ice in a day.
I
would
don't
think.
disagree with that. My question was, because we said we are going to apply for grants for emergency management. Okay, and so I'm not certain that the people who provide grants for you to have the proper emergency management would be worried about the hockey game type thing.
But the grant doesn't cover nearly what this is gonna cost, so.
So I leave it to you. I just want to
Yep.
make sure that we're
Yep.
we're
No,
fully
understood.
conscious of the two different terms here of
Yep.
emergency.
Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, so moving on. So security cameras at the cultural center and the library. So it's the two buildings. And so that would be split amongst the reserves of the library and the cultural service. So there had been some issues in the past of vandalism, et cetera. So this has been a recommendation to have security cameras there to protect the assets.
Any chance of getting rebates or anything from the insurance companies if we have additional security?
I can look into that.
Because if that's the case, then it might open us up to saying where else we might need security cameras in the municipality, because we've had the problem with, the washrooms and various and sundry
At
other
the
things.
waste sites, et cetera, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, oh, sorry.
Councilor McKelvey?
So can we put this in the maybe category? Like I'm just struggling with the cost of this for one area of the municipality. It's a lot of money for security cameras at the library museum. We have experienced a break-in, and I get that. It didn't cost us a lot, but most of the time these problems are the security cameras don't even catch it because they're masks over their face, so.
Sorry, I think Councilor Ingram was first.
Through the chair. Candace, I don't see it in here. Maybe I'm just overlooking it, but we talked about pricing out some streetlights for the Riverwalk as opposed to replacing what was there. Do you remember that? Is that in here somewhere else?
So through the chair, there'll be a later report. There's, not in these talks, there's some different, information that we have to bring forth.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Sandy?
Yes, thank you. One of the reasons this is coming for the cultural center is because of the vandalism that we face, and with the OPP recommendation, what we do. The cost of these cameras isn't like you would install in other places. This actually lets you see who's doing the damage. So there is the idea of being able to have cameras that are efficient enough that you could see a face, that you could see more than just your typical security cameras. Thus the expense of this. And I understand that this might be tied into our IT system as well. So this is not just your typical go out and buy a $300 camera and put it there. This is something that is going to be strategic and working and recommended by the OPP that we do. I would recommend that we go ahead with this, not that we wouldn't go ahead with it in other areas. But I think we need to do something because we have seen everything from tiles being ripped off the roofs, people climbing on the roofs, to all sorts of other things there. And that is an area that we don't have people coming and going at all hours as well, that can kind of keep a civil eye on it, if you will. So I'm supporting this direction with the security cameras at our cultural center. And I also think we have to recognize that there are some important things at that cultural center that this community would certainly not want to see damaged, or the cost of things there are irreplaceable in terms of art and things that we hold there. So really strongly would like to see these security cameras installed yesterday. And so I would support this. I don't know if anybody else would like to add to that. Thank you.
Well, sorry, Counselor.
I just wanted to mention, good positive thing on the skating harness, which is gonna be almost completed. I was gonna also mention the lights around the river. Just wondering about the roof for the library and the cultural center. Last year you had the Olympia resurfacer, in the books. Just wondering what's happening with that. The Snowden, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Sorry, the footbridge, as well as the Water Street dock replacement. And just wondering, is the ball diamond all completed?
So on some of the items, they will be coming forward later as alternative projects that council will have to consider. So I can let you speak on the other.
Yeah, so hopefully the ice skating harness will be put to bed in the next couple of weeks. Snowden Park and Water Street, they are under review. Those are larger projects as we got into further investigation in those items. So that will be discussed later. As I mentioned to Councillor Ingram with the river walk lights, there'll be further information coming down with that. And the baseball diamonds were for Irondale and Lachlan, and those were on hold. So those were before my time, but nothing has been done at those areas.
Deputy Mayor Shell?
We seem to be skipping around here a lot, but now that that question's been asked about the dock, I belong to the Joint Accessibility Committee at the county. And one of the things that was brought up was that our dock in town is not accessible. So anyway, I'd like to go back to what we were talking about, the cultural center cameras, but just as that's been brought up, I'm going to mention that now.
Sorry, did you say accessible or acceptable?
Accessible,
Accessible.
like the joint accessibility, like people in a wheelchair can't get the dock. So
Yes.
just something to consider.
Through the chair,
I'm sure you have.
that's the information that has come across in our investigating of last year.
I figured as much. Thank you.
Sorry, did you? Counselor McKelvey?
I'm trying to figure out why these aren't being dealt with here, like the Riverwalk lights is a budget item. The Snowden Park Bridge is a budget item. The docks in town are a budget item. We were We had $60,000 in the budget last year to fix the roof at the Library Cultural Center. The ice is taking off our eaves trough. Have do not cross tape across the back. Like, I don't understand any of this, why this isn't here. These are definitely budget items. And I have to question again, why the Zamboni's not in here, because last year that went recorded vote and it was nasty, and now all of a sudden it's not even needed. But last year it was critical, so I'm really struggling with the lack of information.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I can speak to a couple of these. The Water Street dock, the amount of money that was in the budget last year was simply for the surface. And as staff got reviewing it much further, there's much more work involved in replacing that dock. As I said to you on Tuesday, the way the budget process goes is people bring forward all the things that they think are needed. We vet them, and you will have some things that will sit in a parking lot. We haven't brought them forward as part of the budget because frankly, we would be sitting at 15 or 16% proposed tax rate increase. So we still have much more work to do on the Snowden Park footbridge, and we have more work to do to bring forward proper numbers to council on the Water Street dock. So that's why they're not before you today. I will let you speak to the Olympia because I think there was an option to lease something. I'm trying to remember. Oh, the cultural center roof, I believe, is one of our not included in the budget, but we will discuss it later today. The $60,000 that was in the budget last year, some of that was used for repairs to the roof. That wasn't going to replace the entire roof, and we mentioned that last year.
So through the chair, so the ice resurfacer, through last year's budget talks, it was the request for council that when the Olympia went into its annual servicing, that we would have an overview of the functionings of the internal functions of the Olympia. At this time, it is holding together from it, and it will go back into for its annual servicing in 2025, which will be asking for the exact same report, and probably we'll see it on the 2026 budget, but we are investigating some grant options as well.
Is there any other capital?
Nope, that would be it, unless there was other comments or concerns.
Councillor McKelvey?
So is the Cultural Center Library roof $60,000 that was in the budget last year being put back in this year? I'm according to this last sheet, it's not. So I'm just trying to figure out.
So it would stay in the reserve right at this very moment, and then we'll discuss it once we get to tab 7 on what we think that needs to happen there.
Okay. Any other questions on Cultural Center?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, staff is making notes of all of council's comments. Our intention is to come back to February 4th with all of the follow-ups and all of the answers to your questions. There will be recommendations there and budget impacts listed for you. And at that time, you can decide, are they in or are they out?
Councillor Saini?
I would like to take a vote on the security cameras today, if we can, and include them And do that as soon as we can, because it is a security item for all the things that we own, incredible collection that we have there that can't be replaced, and the kinds of damages that we've seen. So if we can support this as an important item, because we don't want to say we postpone this and then there's some damage and the security cameras would have prevented or and repercussions for anybody who's
We're coming back on
damaged.
February 4th to determine the budget. And so,
So this you want to put on the list, but okay, I'm speaking very
So-
strongly for this. So I'd like other counselors to really consider what we have at risk if we don't do this. Thank you.
and that's fine. You know, at the end of the day, when we get all these numbers recalculated, we'll decide where our budget and our tolerance is, and determine what's in, what's out. You know, I can't say it better than that, I think. All right.
Okay.
That's it for community services.
Yes. So we'll move into
Planning.
planning services. So just as a opening comment, given council's recent discussion regarding fees and direction to staff to analyze the fees and expenses, historically, planning fees have been aligned with other municipalities within the county. Council has indicated direction to assign applicable costs to the application. So staff is doing that analysis in preparation to report to the council in March. So, so for February 4th, the proposed planning budget will be adjusted based on the fee analysis and based on actuals. So we're just, it is a working document, so those numbers will be reviewed again. So the overall revenue as it stands today has been adjusted down by 16,270. Some previous revenues were not being realized in the past budget projections, and some revenues have increased to better mirror actuals. That being said, we're continuing to look at some revenue items based on the current fees and services proposed changes. So again, in this department, staffing has been fully annualized now with wages and benefits. Consultants was reduced by 25,000, and potential further reductions will be looked at with the fees and services discussions. Legal was reduced by $20,000. So then we'll do committee of adjustment second, because that is now part of planning. So is there any commentary or concerns on planning as a whole?
I have a concern about legal.
Okay.
You know, this is getting to be an increasingly litigious society, and we seem to get, you know, challenged on almost everything. So I just think it would be worthwhile to maintain at least the legal, you know, hopefully we don't have to spend it.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get behind the 8 ball. I mean, you know, we've had, it seems ludicrous, you know, suits that brought against us on what seemed to be pretty straightforward items. So that one I'd be a little concerned about. I don't want to get behind on that.
So I'll ask the director to come forward and maybe give some further commentary on that, as we had some discussions even as yesterday.
Okay.
On those.
Good morning. Good morning. Yes, good morning, council. I had to double check where we are in the day. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I certainly agree with your comment that we're seeing more and more instances where we do have to seek legal advice. So I'm happy to consider
keeping it as it is. The reason that we did reduce it is because we have had a lot of OLT hearings in the last couple of years. So that does contribute to the legal fees that we've had. I'm hoping partially because of the changes in legislation where appeal rights have changed, that we'll see less of those going forward. And would hope that that might reduce our legal costs overall. But as you said, we're in a new world where legal matters arise even outside of OLT more often.
Well, it's just, I also see, in discussions that there's been a lot of pre-planning for some fairly large projects. There's bound to be somebody who doesn't like something about it. And so I would, as a contingency, I would just like to make certain that we have the buffer there to protect ourselves if we so need.
So is there any other comments or concerns on planning as a whole?
Councilor McKelvey?
So I'm gonna assume, because we had that previous discussion where we are no longer going to pay for the expert services that we were having to do because of a lack of staff, that's been taken out of the expenditure side of this budget. We only had that discussion Tuesday, so
Yeah, so we have reduced the consultants so far. But again, we're gonna review it further based on the fees and charges of cost recovery going forward. So that may be adjusted as well for February 4th further.
Councilor McKelvey?
committee of adjustments doesn't seem to have the fees for the minor variances in here, and I know they're in the general planning, but I mean, it could just be me, but I wish they were with the committee of adjustment, because if you look at it, our budget's gonna be 27,200 for expenses and 6,000 for revenue. And again, I've been preaching this for a while. We should not be taking the taxpayers' money and subsidizing a minor variance to that extent. So I mean, I'll quit preaching it, but I won't quit feeling it.
So is this, when we talked about fees and charges last week or whenever it was, what you're saying is some of that discussion is going to affect these numbers and you're
Yes.
working on them?
Yes,
We're going to see.
we started working on that just recently.
Okay,
so.
and does that assuage Councilor McKelvey's question? Is that going to
Yes,
be?
that will be all in part of the review coming back February 4th.
Councilor McKelvey?
I will want it when it comes back. I just want a clarification on the wages and because we have now started to pay, or I think you indicated to me that we're gonna start paying the members of the committee through payroll.
Yes,
So that's not reflected in this yet either. So, I mean, it should offset one line.
so they'll still be paid through payroll, but there's no like traditional deductions, I believe,
Okay, well, it's pensionable earnings, so I just leave it up.
because it's considered an honorarium, I believe.
I'll leave it at that. Do we need to set another budget meeting in February? Because there is no way when we get the detail, we're gonna go right back to asking all these questions. I'm just suggesting we look at it now where everybody has their.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have talked about whether or not we need to even put a placeholder in. If that makes council feel more
It's just
comfortable.
easier for you to get our schedule here than it is you sending us emails. Can you meet here? No, I can't. I'm at holidays. I'm over here. I've got the kids.
Perhaps when we break, Mr. Mayor, we can
Okay.
do that.
All right,
So we'll move into planning committee of adjustment. So under other expenses, that was reduced by 5,300. Postage and advertising both were reduced by $500 each. And there is going to be a further review of wages being looked at based on the frequency of meetings. For actuals. So is there any comments that council has on that part of the budget?
Okay, so what next from you,
Yep.
Madam Director?
So if there's no further questions on planning, we would move to tab 7. So these are items that we've put forward from staff's perspective of different things that do you want this included as a potential in the budget going forward for February 4th, or do you not? So I guess this number 1, we've already dealt with that. But we had put this on as an item that was not in the budget, so that has been dealt with, and we're gonna move forward with the 2 students. Number 2, cultural center, library roof and ventilation. So this is where there was budget money in the previous budget, but we feel that there might be more money needed than the, I think it was 60,000 in the previous budget. And what is council's wish on this item?
I think
You know, like,
it's a difficult
Yeah.
question to answer.
Yeah.
I mean, if, you know, if we see our total budget and see, you know, what the tax levy is gonna be, I
Mhm.
mean, obviously the answer to this is, yes, we want to get it done.
yes,
And it may be a further, yes, we have to get it done because of, you know, the deterioration or whatever. And it may not be able to be put off, but it's also balanced against what our total tax is. So it's a bit difficult to answer some of these questions at this point.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and it was a bit of a light bulb moment for me. I just texted the treasurer and I said, do we have budget numbers for these? I'm not sure how council is going to make this decision.
Yeah.
So I think if we can just, is there anything on the list that you look at and say, don't bring it back as a follow-up item? My recommendation would be that these items are part of the follow-up where we're giving you much more detail. Because I would agree, I don't know how you can make the decision if you don't have a bit more detail.
Like, I don't know how much a herd of sheep costs, but you know, in this, but, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, I think what we were trying to show you was things that staff thought were important that were considered, but they were put in what we've deemed the parking lot. If council wants the entire list, other than we've dealt with the Laughlin Community Center and in-house cemetery grass cutting.
Number 8's done. Keeping isn't gonna
Well,
be coming back.
The first,
Like we would bring all of these back with more information for
bring
you.
them back
Thank
with
you.
more information.
We got a budget already, the 2.2 million, I believe, for the land or the dump. There's no way I'd ever support having a sheep put, because in 2 years we won't need it. So why would we spend another 400,000 or 500,000? So I don't see the point of bringing it back at all.
Well, I just like to see what it is and how much it costs. I mean, yeah, I'm sure it is lots and I'm 99% certain I agree with you, but I'm not. I just want to have it at least brought up so it's addressed and dealt with.
I'd like to see, as you said, the how much we're gonna gain by using it,
Sure.
right? And you can lease them per month. They stay on site. So, I mean, we did use one year. I'm not sure if you were on them, Bob, or not, but Mr. Carver, Mayor Carver. And it was effective. There's no doubt about that, but it has to be dedicated to be used all day long, every day. So there's a lot to it. I'd like to know more information. Maybe it's something in 5 years from now we get it, or maybe we don't get it at all.
Yeah. You know, it's probably no, but I think at least if
Yeah.
it's brought here, then we can address it and agree to no.
Okay.
And then it's put to, it's not brought up every month or whatever. Okay. Counselor Addison? Sure. Sure, turn on your mic and you can speak.
Thank you. I was gonna mention this a while back when the Bailey Barn came up in discussion, and then we thought maybe it would be best just to discuss it at budget time, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna give you a little bit of history on this for some that might not know. The Bailey Barn dated back to the late 1800s, relocated to the Minden Hills Museum in Heritage Village in 1999 from its original location of the Deep Bay Road and Murdoch Road area. It dates back to a time when farming was essential. The Heritage Village captures a diverse history of our community. Minden Hills Museum opened in 1984 as a modest one-building facility operated solely by dedicated volunteers, but has grown considerably since then. Fast track to now, we have a small village of buildings and a cultural center run by a great team with huge efforts making the center and village a hub. Every artifact, large or small, tells its own unique story. All are hysterical and educational. Our museum, which we are very lucky to have, remains very much a vibrant part of the community's presence and future. March 7, 2023, we as council sat at these tables discussing the budget in the Bailey Barn. I realized that there was some pushback last year and mostly likely hasn't changed. 5,000 does seem high to tell us if it is good or not. By looking at it, we all question that. Why should this come from the taxpayers? We do have a reserve fund amount of 30,000 that has been set aside for engineering and construction. I know there was pushback on this as well. What do? We will have to pay an amount, whatever the decision will be. We need a proper estimate to either make it safe for the public and staff. In addition of some sort, somewhere to hold the artifacts which have been donated by many community members. If the decision is to dismantle the Bailey Barn, maybe some of the wood can be made into benches or something in that matter. The poor Bailey Barn has been in the budget for a number of years. We need to move on. During last year's budget, we were told to wait for the advisory committee to be formed, and each one of us, I believe, would like to see a positive but well spent outcome. Thank you.
Okay, we'll bring this back and we'll make the decision, I guess, starting on February 4th, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So you've gone through your tab 7.
That's it. So unless there's any further comments that staff need to review, that you may have missed.
Councilor McKelvey?
So can we agree then that I thought we were going to come back and look at these reserves today. So now you're saying we'll look at them in February.
Yeah, we have to.
I had some other questions. No.
Okay, so there's not a resolution, is there, on this? So Councilor McKelvey.
Little Ivan
I
disease
have
there
to
for a
speak.
minute.
Aye.
Yeah. Well, no, but it was a bit of a memory thing too. I was shuffling to make it come up, but anyways, before you make me forget it. The treasurer, I'd just like to point out that the arena had fundraised money that should be somewhere that's still left. There should also be money in a reserve or something somewhere that was, the debenture was more than they needed. And that's been sitting there for a while as it was talked last year, it was talked about again the year before. I would like an accounting of that if we could to find out Are we talking $5 or 500?
That's the reserve.
I'm assuming it's a reserve, but again, it's not showing. So I think it's some of these, the history that it's really difficult for somebody new to find. So I'm trying to share that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor McKelvey, can I just clarify those two comments were made about the arena project?
Yeah, when the
Okay.
arena was debentured, we were told by the previous treasurer, there was still some money that could be used from that debenture. It was more than what had been allocated. We were also told there was fundraising money when they did the seat sale, $500 a seat, I think, or something. How many thousands did you pull?
Okay.
That sort of thing. I just want you to be able to know that
Yeah.
so that I don't bring it up on February 4th and you go.
Yeah, then I can look
Why
at
did you come?
previous reports, et cetera.
So again, there's more needed in the reserve end of things.
All right, sorry, Councilor Yohannesson.
Sorry, just one thing I didn't add, say on my little list there. Green burials, just wondering where we are with that.
It's a larger review, like there's some major components to that, but we are working through that.
Councilor McKelvey.
The harness. Can you tell us how, is it coming in? We had it at $10,000. Is it going to come in at that? Candace?
So through the chair, there was an earlier report. Currently, it is at 12,000.
Is this budget related question? Okay, go ahead.
How else would it be?
I don't know.
Okay. At the previous meeting, it was mentioned that there may be some landfill wages missing it, and I know it's only been 2 days. Just would like, did you have any time to figure out? That's a big item if
Yeah,
it's
so
3.5.
that's gonna be the rest of this week. I'll be working on those numbers.
Okay. So. Yeah,
Moved by Counselor Saney, seconded by Counselor Sisson. Be it resolved that council proceed into closed session at 11:32 a.m. for the purpose of discussing one item pursuant to section 239(2)B of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, staff conduct.
all those in favor? That is carried. We will go in, start closed at 11:40. All right, we're back. So we are at the bylaws section.
But
Please
we
read.
have to just do the resolution to go back into.
Okay,
Okay.
please do the resolution.
Okay, moved by Counselor Saney, seconded by Counselor Sisson. Be it resolved that closed session adjourn at 11:49 a.m. and open session resume.
All those in favor? That is carried. Bylaws.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Shell, seconded by Councillor McKelvey, that bylaw 2512 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held during its special meeting of January 16th, 2025, be received, read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed.
All those in favor? That is carried. Adjournment.
Moved by Councillor Johansson, second by Councillor Ingram, be it resolved that the January 16th, 2025 special council meeting is hereby adjourned at 11:49 a.m.
All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. Our next regular council meeting is scheduled for Thursday, January 30th at 9 a.m. And because we like spending so much time together, we will have another special meeting to finish budget deliberation process scheduled for Tuesday, February the 4th at 9 a.m. and perhaps even more to come after that. Thank you all. Bye.